Hey, welcome to Lighthouse. Tonight we have 5 true chilling horror stories. The first story is about an 80-year-old widow who discovered her beloved son never actually left her house 20 years ago, Brooklyn, New York. Then we have an 18-year-old hiker who vanished on Hawaii's forbidden stairway to heaven with a mysterious figure following him, Oahu, Hawaii. Our third case involves a young social worker who made 3 frantic 911 calls before disappearing into thin air, Utah. We'll explore the college student who drove off a cliff and vanished without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic final words, California. Finally, we have the aeronautical student who abandoned his car in Atlanta but was found frozen solid in a block of ice 1,200 miles away, Wisconsin. Let's get started. Case 1. The Son Who Never Left. September 15, 2016 dawned gray and humid in Brooklyn, New York, as the city's residents prepared for another ordinary weekday. The brick-lined streets of this working-class neighborhood had seen decades of families come and go, but few houses held secrets as dark as the one at Rita Wolfenson's address. Rita, an 80-year-old widow who had lived as a hermit for 2 decades, shuffled into her kitchen that morning, her nearly blind eyes straining to navigate the familiar yet cluttered space. Her home had become a maze of newspapers and rotting food, the result of years of hoarding and isolation. As she moved past her kitchen table, her foot caught a basket of newspapers on the ground. The fall was immediate and brutal. Rita hit the linoleum floor with a sickening crack, and the sharp pop she heard was followed by shooting pain through her hip. She knew instantly her hip was broken, and she was completely alone with no one to help her. But Rita's biggest problem wasn't just the broken hip. It was the fact that she had systematically cut off every person in her life for the past 20 years, all because of what she believed happened with her beloved son, Louis. After Rita managed to crawl to her phone and call 911, paramedics arrived to find the elderly woman in excruciating pain on her kitchen floor. At the hospital, doctors confirmed her broken hip, but delivered devastating news. She couldn't return home alone. Her near blindness, frail condition, and isolation made living independently impossible. Faced with the prospect of assisted living, Rita made a call she hadn't made in 2 decades, to her younger brother, Joseph. Joseph had been the one family member who'd tried desperately to maintain contact after Rita had inexplicably severed all relationships 20 years earlier. The catalyst for Rita's isolation had been Louis's sudden departure. One day he was there, the next he had simply vanished without explanation, taking nothing with him. Rita convinced herself that her 29-year-old son had stopped loving her and abandoned her, sending her into a spiraling depression that caused her to shut out the world entirely. Joseph immediately agreed to help and sent his wife to Rita's house to collect personal items for her hospital stay. What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about Louis's disappearance. When Joseph's wife arrived at Rita's brick home, she was prepared for the smell and squalor of a hoarder's dwelling. She made her way through hallways piled high with newspapers and rotting food, breathing through her mouth to avoid the stench. She climbed the second floor, searching for Rita's bedroom to gather toiletries and clothes. The upstairs was in the same condition as the first floor, plates of decomposing food, stacks of junk, and that overwhelming smell that seemed to permeate every corner of the house. She approached the first bedroom door she encountered, hoping it might be Rita's room. The door was closed, which seemed odd given that Rita lived alone and had for the past 20 years. As she turned the handle and pushed the door open, she was hit with a wave of putrid air, far worse than anything she'd encountered downstairs. But the smell was nothing compared to what she saw lying in the bed. The truth that Rita had lived with for 20 years was far more tragic than abandonment. Her son Louis hadn't left her at all. 20 years earlier, when Louis was 29 years old and still living at home with his mother, he had died unexpectedly from natural causes, likely a terminal illness he may never have known he had or communicated to his mother. On that night 2 decades ago, Louis had gone to his bedroom and passed away in his sleep. Instead of checking on him when he didn't emerge the next day, Rita, dealing with her own deteriorating mental state and increasing reclusiveness, had convinced herself that his absence meant he'd packed up and left her. She never entered his room to check. She never looked for him. She simply accepted what she believed was his rejection and allowed it to consume her life, cutting off all family relationships and becoming a hermit in her own home. For 20 years, Louis had remained in his bed, his body decomposing in the sealed room, while his heartbroken mother lived floors below, believing herself abandoned and unloved. Joseph's wife discovered Lewis's skeletal remains, still wearing the shirt and pants he died in, lying peacefully in his childhood bed. Her screams and immediate 911 call finally brought the truth to light after 2 decades of unnecessary grief and isolation. In the most twisted way imaginable, it was Rita's broken hip and her brother's kindness that finally reunited her with the son who had never actually left her. The discovery was both devastating and oddly healing. Rita learned that Lewis had never stopped loving her, never abandoned her, never chosen to walk away from their life together. Sometimes the most heartbreaking mysteries hide in plain sight, don't they? What would you have done if you were in Rita's position all those years ago? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more chilling true stories. Case 2. The Stairway to Nowhere. February 27, 2015 brought perfect hiking weather to the Hawaiian island of Oahu, where 18-year-old Delan Pua was visiting his grandmother during what should have been a peaceful family vacation. The island was alive with tourists and locals enjoying the tropical paradise, but Delan had his sights set on something far more dangerous than the typical beach day. Dallin, a Hawaiian native who rarely got to spend time on Oahu, had always been fascinated by the island's most infamous and forbidden attraction, the Haiku Stairs, better known as the Stairway to Heaven. These rusted, narrow, poorly maintained 4,000 steps snake their way up the side of a Hawaiian mountain, built during World War II by the US Navy to access a secret radio station. After the war ended, the military had initially allowed public access to enjoy the spectacular summit views. However, by 1987, the dangerous conditions and multiple accidents forced authorities to close the stairs permanently, installing fences and posting guards to keep thrill-seekers away. Trespassers faced thousands of dollars in fines and potential criminal charges. But the forbidden nature of the climb only made it more appealing to adventurous young people like Delan, who saw it as the ultimate Instagram-worthy challenge. When Delan announced his intention to attempt the illegal hike, his grandmother immediately protested, warning him about both the physical dangers and the hefty legal consequences. Delan seemed to back down, assuring her he wouldn't risk it, but this was apparently just to avoid an argument. Right after breakfast, while his grandmother believed he was safely staying home, Delan quietly slipped out, caught a bus, and made his way to the base of the forbidden stairway. Despite knowing he was breaking the law and putting himself at risk, his excitement was too strong to resist. In a decision that would prove crucial to the investigation, Delan documented his entire illegal adventure on social media, posting photos as he progressed up the treacherous 4,000-step climb. His post showed breathtaking views of the Hawaiian landscape and his obvious joy at finally experiencing this forbidden adventure. The steady stream of photos continued throughout the morning, showing Dallin making good progress up the mountain, but then, around 11:00 a.m., something changed. The posting stopped abruptly, and he clearly hadn't reached the summit yet. For someone who had been documenting every step of this dream hike, the sudden silence was ominous. When Dallin failed to return home that evening, his worried family contacted police immediately. A massive search operation was launched, involving local police, helicopters, Navy personnel, and volunteer searchers combing every inch of the Haiku Stairs and surrounding areas. For days, hundreds of people searched the dense Hawaiian forest and treacherous mountain terrain. The assumption was that Delan had suffered a climbing accident. After all, there was a reason these stairs were off-limits to the public. The rusty, unmaintained steps and steep mountain terrain made falls and injuries inevitable for unprepared hikers. But when investigators began examining Dallin's final social media posts more carefully, they discovered something that changed the entire nature of the investigation. In what appeared to be just another scenic photo of the dense forest surrounding the stairs, careful analysis revealed a chilling detail that initially been missed. Crouched down in the vegetation, partially hidden but clearly visible once you knew where to look, was the figure of a man who appeared to be hiding and watching Dallin from a distance down the trail. The discovery of the mysterious figure raised terrifying new questions about Dallin's disappearance. Had this man been following the young hiker throughout his climb? Was Dallin aware he was being stalked? Did this explain the sudden stop in his social media posts around 11? The positioning of the figure suggested deliberate concealment. This wasn't a casual fellow hiker who happened to be in the background of Dallin's photo. The person appeared to be crouching and hiding, maintaining a distance that would allow them to follow without being detected. This revelation shifted the investigation from a tragic hiking accident to a potential abduction or murder case. The remote, illegal nature of the Haiku Stairs made it an ideal location for someone with sinister intentions. Few witnesses, no official oversight, and plenty of places to hide evidence in the dense Hawaiian wilderness. The mysterious figure's identity became the key to solving Dalen's disappearance. But despite extensive investigation and public appeals for information, no one has ever been able to identify the person in the photo. Despite one of the most extensive search operations in Hawaiian history, Dalen Pua was never found. No trace of him was discovered on the mountain, in the surrounding forest, or anywhere else on the island. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air at 11:00 a.m. on February 27th. The case remains officially unsolved, but many investigators and amateur sleuths believe the mysterious figure in Dalen's final photo holds the key to understanding what happened. Was this a random encounter that turned deadly, or had Dalen been specifically targeted? The Haiku Stairs remain closed to this day, but Dalen's story serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest danger isn't the mountain itself, but the people who might be watching from the shadows. Do you think the figure in the photo was responsible for Dalen's disappearance, or could there be another explanation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more mysterious true crime stories. Case 3. The Three Calls to Nowhere. September 26, 2014 was shaping up to be a quiet Friday evening in the Utah condo complex where 25-year-old Kaylin Louder lived with her roommate Carol. The complex was typical of modern suburban developments, well-maintained grounds, a clubhouse for residents, and the kind of peaceful atmosphere that attracted young professionals starting their careers. Kaylin had been struggling through a difficult period in her life. Despite her degree in social work from Utah State and her passionate desire to help vulnerable people overcome addiction and depression, she'd been facing long stretches of unemployment that were taking their toll on her mental state and finances. At 9:00 p.m. that evening, emergency dispatchers received the first call that would launch one of the most puzzling missing persons cases in Utah history. The caller was Kaylin, and she was reporting a massive, violent fight taking place in her condo complex's clubhouse, a brutal altercation that she claimed involved weapons and was getting dangerously out of control. But when police rushed to the scene expecting to find chaos and violence, they discovered something completely different: a quiet, peaceful wedding reception with confused guests who insisted nothing unusual had happened. The responding officers were baffled. The wedding guests were celebrating calmly, keeping noise levels reasonable, and couldn't understand where the report of a violent fight had come from. The only unusual sound anyone could recall was a single small firecracker that had been lit earlier, hardly the gunshots and brutal violence that Kaylin had described. 1 hour later, Kaylin called 911 again, but this time she immediately hung up when the operator answered. When dispatch called back, Kaylin answered, but seemed confused, disoriented, and unable to remember her own address. Her speech was mumbled and unclear as she struggled to communicate with the concerned operator. During the second call, Kaylin made a statement that would prove significant. "My roommate thinks I'm delusional and paranoid, but I'm not." After apologizing for the call, she hung up, leaving the operator wondering what was really happening. The third call came the next morning and was far more disturbing. Kaylin was frantic, periodically screaming at two people she claimed were robbing her apartment. "Get the F out of here! Get out of my apartment! You can't be here!" she yelled, while the operator tried to gather information and dispatch help. As the 911 operator stayed on the line, trying to keep Kaylin safe until officers could arrive, something unexpected happened. Kaylin's roommate Carol walked into the bedroom and calmly asked, "Kaylin, what's going on?" Kaylin frantically told Carol to lock the door and hide because there were two intruders robbing their apartment. But Carol's response was chilling. "No, there's no one here, the front door is locked." When police arrived at the apartment, they found no signs of a break-in, nothing had been stolen, and there was no evidence that anyone had been inside the apartment other than Kaylin and Carol. Kaylin seemed confused and embarrassed, suggesting that maybe the intruders had used a key to get in and out without being detected. The young woman apologized profusely to the officers and called her mother to express her mortification at having made 3 false 911 calls in less than 24 hours. To her mother, she seemed to return to normal, discussing plans to update her resume and clean her apartment, typical activities for someone trying to get their life back on track. Kaylin's struggles weren't random or without context. Her twin brother Colton had battled depression and drug addiction from a young age, despite his outgoing personality and infectious laugh. By age 25, Colton was serving a life sentence for murdering their uncle in a drug-related dispute. Watching her brother's downward spiral had devastated Kaylin, but instead of giving up, she channeled her grief into helping others. She earned her social work degree specifically to prevent other vulnerable people from ending up like Colton. However, the job market in her field was challenging, leading to long periods of unemployment that were clearly affecting her mental state. The timing of Kaylin's crisis seemed to coincide with these employment struggles and the ongoing trauma of her brother's situation. Her family insisted she had no history of mental illness or drug use. In fact, her brother's addiction had made her vigilantly anti-drug. They described her as well-adjusted and stable until these mysterious 911 calls began. At 5:45 p.m. on September 27th, security cameras captured Kaylin leaving her condo with her beloved dog Phyllis. Despite cold, rainy weather, she was barefoot and wearing only a tank top and shorts. The footage shows her having an animated conversation with someone who wasn't there, gesturing and speaking to empty air for about 15 minutes. Then something changed. Kaylin suddenly stopped talking, put her dog down, and began running away from the complex, abandoning the pet she took everywhere. She had no phone, no wallet, and no one knew where she was going. 10 weeks later, city workers found Kaylin's body half submerged in the Jordan River 5 miles from her apartment. There were no drugs in her system, no water in her lungs, and no clear cause of death. The distance from her apartment and the shallow, winding nature of the river made it impossible for her body to have drifted there naturally. Police ruled her death an accident, but Kaylin's family believes the security footage shows she was terrified of someone the cameras couldn't see. Possibly someone hiding behind the large rock formation visible in the video. Was this a psychotic break, or was Kaylin being stalked by someone who ultimately killed her? What do you think happened to Kaylin Louder? Was she experiencing a mental health crisis, or was there really someone threatening her that no one else could see? Let me know your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysterious true stories. Case 4. The Drive to Oblivion. Mid-August 2013 brought the familiar ritual of back-to-school preparations to the affluent community of Laguna Niguel, California. For Mike and Karen Laspisa, this meant helping their beloved only child, 19-year-old Bryce, pack up for his sophomore year at Sierra College in Rocklin, California. Bryce seemed to be living the perfect college life. He was studying graphic design, a field that suited his artistic talents perfectly. He had a close circle of friends, a loving girlfriend named Kim, and parents who adored him. The 7-hour drive north to his campus was filled with optimistic conversations about his future and their pride in his accomplishments. After moving Bryce into his apartment and sharing tearful goodbyes, Mike and Karen drove home feeling confident about their son's trajectory. He appeared happy, motivated, and well-adjusted, everything parents hope for in a college-age child. But just 2 weeks later, something would happen that would shatter their understanding of their son and launch one of California's most baffling missing persons cases. Within days of returning to school, Bryce's roommate Sean and girlfriend Kim noticed alarming changes in his behavior. Bryce, who enjoyed social drinking, like most college students, was now consuming dangerous amounts of hard alcohol. Even more concerning, he had begun experimenting with Vivance, a powerful stimulant typically prescribed for ADHD, which he was using to stay awake for marathon video game sessions. The combination of heavy drinking and stimulant abuse was clearly affecting Bryce's personality. He became anxious, skittish, and increasingly paranoid. When Sean and Kim confronted him about his substance abuse, Bryce insisted everything was fine and refused to explain what might be causing his self-destructive behavior. On August 28th, Bryce's behavior became even more erratic. He gave Sean his expensive diamond earrings, a gift from his mother, and his Xbox, valuable possessions he had never offered to part with before. When Sean questioned these strange gifts, Bryce insisted he wanted his roommate to have them. Then, Bryce pulled out his phone and began aggressively texting someone. When he finished, he looked up and calmly announced that he had just broken up with Kim via text message. Shocking news given their close relationship and the fact that they had seemed happy just hours earlier. Recognizing that something was seriously wrong, Sean contacted Bryce's parents while Bryce went to Kim's apartment to discuss their sudden breakup. Kim was so concerned about Bryce's strange behavior that she confiscated his car keys, refusing to let him drive in his current state. When Karen answered Sean's call, warning her about her son's erratic behavior and substance abuse, she was immediately alarmed. Before she could even process this information fully, Kim called from her apartment, echoing Sean's concerns and explaining that she had taken Bryce's keys because something was clearly wrong with him. Karen spoke directly to Bryce, who sounded normal on the phone, but made a cryptic statement that would haunt his parents. "I have a lot to talk to you about, and until I talk to you about it, I don't want you coming out here." When pressed for details, Bryce refused to elaborate, which was completely unlike his typically open relationship with his parents. After much discussion, Karen reluctantly convinced Kim to return Bryce's keys so he could drive back to his apartment. Bryce promised to call when he arrived safely, and at 1 a.m., he did call to confirm he was home. What Bryce needed to discuss with his parents remains one of the most haunting aspects of this case. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, something had clearly happened that triggered his dramatic personality change and substance abuse. His friends and family were unanimous that this behavior was completely out of character for the happy, well-adjusted young man they knew. The timing suggests that whatever traumatic event occurred happened shortly after he returned to school for his sophomore year. Whether it was related to academics, relationships, finances, or something else entirely, it was significant enough to drive him to dangerous levels of drinking and drug use as a coping mechanism. Bryce's final actions suggest he was planning something drastic, giving away his most prized possessions, breaking up with his girlfriend, and insisting he needed to talk to his parents in person about something he couldn't discuss over the phone, all point to someone preparing for a major life change or preparing to end his life entirely. At 11 a.m. the next morning, Karen received an automated call from their car insurance company. Roadside assistance had been used on Bryce's car in Buttonwillow, California, a small desert town halfway between his school and home. When they tracked down the location, they learned Bryce had run out of gas and was sitting motionless in a rest stop parking lot for hours. Despite multiple interventions by helpful strangers and police officers who found him coherent but unwilling to explain his behavior, Bryce continued his bizarre journey south. Phone calls with his parents became increasingly evasive, and he refused to provide landmarks or details about his location despite claiming to be driving home. At 2:00 a.m., Bryce told his parents he was too tired to continue and needed to pull over for a nap. That was the last time anyone spoke to him. Hours later, his car was found at the bottom of a 25-foot cliff near Castaic Lake. The back window had been smashed from the inside, suggesting Bryce had escaped the wreck, but there was no sign of him anywhere. Evidence suggested Bryce had intentionally driven off the cliff, accelerating as he went over the edge. Bloodhounds tracked his scent from the crash site to a truck stop across a nearby lake where the trail went cold. Some believe this was a failed suicide attempt and that Bryce died somewhere in the wilderness. Others think he survived and is living off the grid somewhere with a new identity. The most tragic possibility is that Bryce suffered a psychotic break from his drug and alcohol abuse, causing him to act irrationally and ultimately leading to his death or disappearance. But the question that haunts everyone who knew him is simple: what was so terrible that he couldn't discuss it over the phone with the parents he trusted completely? What do you think happened to Bryce Laspisa? Was this a suicide attempt, a mental health crisis, or something else entirely? Share your theories in the comments below, and remember to like this video and subscribe to Lighthouse for more mysterious true crime stories that will keep you guessing. Case 5. The Ice Tomb Mystery. January 24, 1984 started like any other weekday morning in Daytona Beach, Florida, where 19-year-old Timothy Molnar was living at home with his parents while pursuing his degree in aeronautical mathematics. The field was demanding and specialized, requiring the kind of analytical mind that Timothy possessed in abundance. Timothy followed his usual routine that morning, eating breakfast with his family before driving his younger brother Frank to school. After dropping Frank off, he headed across town to his university for classes. But as he sat in his car in the parking lot, he realized he'd forgotten something important: his bicycle, which he took with him everywhere. Rather than go without it, Timothy decided to drive back home to retrieve his bike. His mother watched from the window as he loaded the bicycle into his car and drove away. Heading back toward campus for what should have been a normal day of classes, It was the last time anyone in his family would see Timothy alive. When Timothy failed to come home that evening, his parents immediately contacted police. This wasn't like their responsible, academically focused son who maintained excellent grades and had never given them reason to worry. Timothy didn't drink, didn't use drugs, and had no history of rebellious behavior or mental health issues. The initial investigation focused on Timothy's last known activities. Police discovered a charge on the family's credit card from a gas station about 50 miles from home, placed on the same day Timothy disappeared. When investigators interviewed witnesses at the gas station, they confirmed that Timothy had been there, appeared normal, and was alone. The witness described seeing Timothy go into the store and come back out again without any sign of distress or unusual behavior. There was no indication of where he might have gone after leaving the gas station, and no further credit card activity to track his movements. For several days, the investigation stalled with no new leads or evidence to explain Timothy's sudden disappearance. 1 week after Timothy vanished, his family received an unexpected letter that would provide the first major clue in the case. An auto impound company in Atlanta, Georgia, over 400 miles from Timothy's home, notified them that a car registered to their address was sitting in their lot and needed to be retrieved. When the family traveled to Atlanta to inspect the vehicle, they found Timothy's car in perfect condition with no signs of damage, struggle, or accident. The tires were properly inflated, there were no scratches or dents, and the interior appeared normal. However, a closer examination revealed some puzzling details. Timothy's credit cards, wallet, driver's license, and other personal identification were still inside the car, suggesting he might have been trying to abandon his old identity and start fresh somewhere else. But several valuable items that were typically in his car, his stereo, toolbox, and bicycle, were now missing, possibly sold to obtain cash for his new life. The family waited in Atlanta for several days, hoping Timothy might return to retrieve his car, but he never appeared. When they returned to Florida and searched his room more thoroughly, they discovered that none of his clothes were missing and no suitcase had been taken. He had apparently left with only the clothes on his back. One significant discovery was that Timothy had withdrawn nearly all the money from his savings account, leaving only $10 behind. His family interpreted this as a message. By leaving that small amount, he was indicating that he planned to return someday, but he never did. The evidence suggested that Timothy had made a deliberate decision to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. But what could have motivated a successful, well-adjusted 19-year-old with a promising future to abandon everything he had worked for? There were no signs of depression, financial problems, legal trouble, or relationship issues that might explain such a drastic decision. Timothy's case remained a complete mystery for an entire decade. His family had no closure, no understanding of why their son had chosen to vanish, and no idea whether he was alive or dead somewhere in the country. The case might have remained unsolved forever, if not for a bizarre discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about Timothy's disappearance. 10 years after Timothy vanished, the television show Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment about his disappearance, hoping viewers might provide new information about the case. The broadcast worked better than anyone could have imagined. A Wisconsin man named Stephen Call contacted the show with an incredible story. A decade earlier, during winter, he had been walking through a forested area in Wisconsin when he came upon a clearing and noticed a large lump in the snow. Initially thinking it might be a fallen log or dead animal, Call investigated further and made a horrifying discovery. Buried in the snow was a massive block of ice, and when he brushed the snow away from the top, he could see the preserved body of a young man frozen inside. Call immediately contacted police, who recovered the body, but there was no identification, and the remains were too decomposed to identify through conventional means. The unknown victim was buried as a John Doe. When Call saw Timothy's photograph on Unsolved Mysteries, he immediately recognized the clothing and physical features of the person he had found frozen in that Wisconsin forest. Police exhumed the body, conducted DNA testing, and confirmed that the ice-preserved remains were indeed Timothy Molnar. Even though Timothy's body was almost completely skeletonized after being frozen for a decade, the coroner found no signs of trauma or violence. However, they were unable to determine a cause of death, leaving the most important questions unanswered. How did a 19-year-old college student from Florida end up frozen in a block of ice in a Wisconsin forest, 1,200 miles from where he was last seen? How did he die, and why was his body preserved in such an unusual way? Did someone kill Timothy and dispose of his body in this bizarre manner? Or was this the result of some tragic accident? Timothy Molnar's case remains one of the most puzzling disappearances in American history. The discovery of his body answered the question of whether he was alive or dead, but it created far more mysteries than it solved. What do you think happened to Timothy? Was this an elaborate murder cover-up, a bizarre accident, or something else entirely? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Lighthouse for more chilling true mysteries that will leave you questioning everything you think you know. Those were tonight's 5 chilling true stories that remind us how quickly ordinary lives can take extraordinary and terrifying turns. From Rita's 20-year-old secret to Timothy's frozen fate, 1,200 miles from home, these cases show us that reality is often stranger and more disturbing than any fiction we could imagine. Which story affected you the most? Do you have theories about what really happened in any of these cases? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one and love hearing your thoughts and theories. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, please hit that like button, subscribe to Lighthouse, and ring the notification bell so you'll never miss our weekly deep dives into the strange, dark, and mysterious. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that are completely true.